The gods came out of the sky in a fleet of ships surrounded by dark clouds. They burned their own boats when they landed so there could be no retreat. They carried 4 objects of impossible power, one from each of the 4 cities they had left behind in the north of the world. And the first thing they did when they reached Ireland was go to war. They are called the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. In Irish mythology, they are not the first beings to reach Ireland, and they are not the last. They are the 4th race to invade the island. And unlike the gods of Greece or Egypt or Mesopotamia, they did not create the world. They arrived in a world that already belonged to someone else. They had to fight for every inch of it. They had to bleed for the right to call it home. This is the mythology that almost no one outside Ireland knows. A mythology with no creation story, no cosmic egg, no primordial ocean. Just gods arriving on a shore, setting fire to their ships, and deciding that whatever was already here would have to be removed. Celtic mythology does not begin at the beginning of time. It begins with a series of invasions. The Lebor Gabála Érenn, the Book of Invasions, is the closest thing Irish mythology has to a foundational text. It describes 6 successive waves of settlers arriving in Ireland, each one displacing or destroying what came before. The island is not sacred because a god made it. It is sacred because it has been fought over since before recorded memory. Before the Tuatha De Danann, there were the Fair Bolg, a mortal race, tough, practical, settled. They had divided Ireland into 5 provinces and were governing it competently when the clouds appeared on the horizon. The Fair Bolg were not evil. They were not monsters. They were simply the people who were there when someone stronger arrived. Celtic mythology does not pretend that conquest is moral. It just records that it happens. And before the Fair Bolg, there were the Fomorians. This is where the myth gets dark. The Fomorians are older than any race that came to Ireland. They are described as beings of chaos and destruction, sometimes with 1 eye, 1 arm, 1 leg. Sometimes beautiful and terrible, sometimes simply wrong in a way the texts struggle to articulate. They are not from Ireland. They are from beneath the sea, or from the north, or from some place that existed before geography had rules. They are what was here before order arrived, and they never fully left. The Tuatha De Danann came from 4 cities in the north of the world: Fálias, Gorias, Finias, Murias. These cities are never described in geographic detail. They exist in the mythology as places of learning and power somewhere beyond the known world, where the Tuatha De Danann studied magic and warfare and the arts of civilization before they came south to claim Ireland. From each city they brought 1 treasure. From Fálias, the Lugh Fail, the Stone of Destiny. It screamed when the rightful king of Ireland stood upon it. From Gorias, the Spear of Lugh. No battle was ever lost by the army that carried it. From Finias, the Sword of Nuada. No one ever escaped it once it was drawn. From Murias, the Cauldron of the Dagda. No one ever walked away from it hungry. 4 objects: a stone that recognizes legitimate power, a spear that guarantees victory, a sword that guarantees death, a cauldron that guarantees abundance. Between them, they cover every function a civilization needs: authority, military power, justice, and sustenance. The Tuatha De Danann did not arrive in Ireland as refugees. They arrived as a fully equipped civilization looking for somewhere to put itself. The Fair Bolg did not surrender. They met the Tuatha De Danann on the plain of Tuired in the west of Ireland. The battle lasted 4 days. The fighting was brutal and close and personal in a way that the Irish texts describe with the specificity of people who understood exactly what happens when bronze meets bone. The Tuatha De Danann won, but their king Nuada lost his right hand in the fighting. It was cut off by Shreng, the champion of the Fair Bolg, in single combat. In Celtic tradition, a king must be physically whole to rule. A blemished king brings blight to the land. The connection between the king's body and the health of the territory was absolute. Nuada, handless, could no longer sit on the throne. This created a crisis. The Tuatha De Danann had just conquered Ireland, and their king was immediately disqualified from ruling it. Into that vacuum stepped Brez, half Tuatha De Danann, half Fomorian, beautiful, charismatic, and catastrophically bad at the job. Brez taxed the gods into poverty. He put the Dagda, the most powerful god in the pantheon, to work building fortifications like a common laborer. He offered no hospitality, the single worst sin in Celtic culture, where a king's generosity was the measure of his fitness to rule. Meanwhile, the physician Dian Sect built Nuada a new hand, made of silver, fully functional. Nuada of the Silver Hand, they called him afterward. It is one of the most distinctive images in any mythology. A god-king with a prosthetic hand made of precious metal, waiting for the moment he could reclaim what the war had cost him. While Brez ruined everything, a young man arrived at the gates of Tara, the seat of the High King. His name was Lugh. He was half Tuatha De Danann, half Fomorian, the same mixed heritage as Brez, but wielding it in the opposite direction. He asked to be admitted to the court. The doorkeeper asked what skill he could offer because no one entered Tara without a craft. Lugh said he was a smith. The doorkeeper said they already had a smith. Lugh said he was a warrior. They had a warrior. A harpist. They had one. A poet. They had one. A sorcerer. A physician. A cupbearer. They had all of them. Lugh asked one question. Do you have anyone who can do all of these things at once? The doorkeeper had no answer. Lugh walked through the gate. He was given the epithet Samildanach, the master of all arts. In a mythology full of specialized gods, Lugh was the exception. He was not the best at any single thing. He was competent at everything. And in the war that was coming, that versatility would matter more than any single champion's strength. Nuada gave him command. Not the throne, not yet, but the strategic authority to prepare the Tuatha De Danann for the war that everyone knew was coming. Because Brez, humiliated and deposed, had gone to his Fomorian kin and asked for an army, the Fomorians came in force. Their king was Balor of the Evil Eye. His eye was so massive and so destructive that it took 4 men to lift the lid, and when it opened, whatever it looked at died. Not struck down, not wounded. Everything in its line of sight simply ceased to exist. An entire army could be erased in a single glance. Balor was not a warrior. He was a weapon. The Second Battle of Mag Tuired was the decisive confrontation of Irish mythology. Every god of the Tuatha De Danann had a role. The Dagda brought his cauldron and his club, a weapon so heavy it killed with one end and brought the dead back to life with the other. The Morrigan, the phantom queen, goddess of war and fate, flew over the battlefield as a crow, shrieking prophecy into the chaos. Dian Techt stood behind the lines, healing the wounded so they could return to fighting. Lugh faced Balor, his own grandfather. Fomorian blood meeting Fomorian blood across a battlefield. When Balor's men began to lift the great eyelid, Lugh put a stone in his sling. He threw it with such force that it drove Balor's eye through the back of his skull. The eye, still open, landed facing the Fomorian army. It killed 27 of their own warriors before it closed. The Fomorians broke. The Tuatha De Danann drove them from Ireland back beneath the sea, back into the darkness they had come from. The land was theirs, fully, finally, without dispute. Won not through divine right, but through 2 battles, a silver hand, a sling stone, and a god who could do everything. The Tuatha De Danann ruled Ireland until the next invasion came. The Milesians, the ancestors of the modern Irish, arrived from Iberia and defeated the gods in turn. But the Tuatha De Danann were not destroyed. They retreated underground into the Side, the hollow hills and fairy mounds that dot the Irish landscape. They became the Aes Side, the people of the mounds, the fairies. The gods of Ireland did not die, they did not ascend to heaven, they went underground. They are still there according to a folk tradition that survived the arrival of Christianity and persisted in rural Ireland well into the 20th century. The fairy forts that farmers refused to plow around, the hawthorn trees that road builders rerouted highways to avoid. The places where the old gods lived were not forgotten. They were simply given a new name. Celtic mythology never wrote itself down. The Druids memorized everything and forbade it from being recorded. What we have comes from Christian monks centuries later, writing down oral traditions that had already been filtered through a new religion. What survived is extraordinary. What was lost is incalculable. The Tuatha De Danann conquered Ireland, ruled it, and were eventually conquered themselves. They did not leave. They went underground. The Irish built their farms on top of the gods and left the fairy mounds alone for 2,000 years. Is that respect, or is it the longest negotiation with a defeated enemy in human history? Next time on Gods and Empires, the final episode of Season 1, we travel east to the edge of Europe, where a mythology was built on a single terrifying idea. The universe was born divided, light on one side, darkness on the other, and the war between them has been going on since the first moment of creation and will never, ever end. The Slavic gods are waiting,